Reading in bed.
He lurked in the shadows, waiting and hoping she wouldn't take a different route. This was a usual room. He knew that. He knew her.
Ghost of Me, the new book by Amanda Steele, can be found at Amazon, Kobo, Waterstones, and many, many other places.
Reading in bed.
Nice, Amanda. Reading in bed, isn't it?
Yes.
Episode 29, is it?
No, it's a lockdown special.
Oh, it's episode 28 then, isn't it?
28 and a half.
Ah, 28 and a half, right.
Unofficially known as the podcast of bad ideas, where I had ideas for spin-offs and only one person got in touch with each one. So we're just going to do them both in an episode together.
Yeah. Now, I know of one of them, and we're going to... Do you want to tell people what the spin-off ideas were, Amanda?
Okay, so one of them was going to be reading out other people's work, which I thought was a nice idea, but only one person agreed with me.
Yeah, go on.
Because I like the idea of somebody reading my work out, that's all. So I just thought other people might, but it turns out I'm a weirdo.
And what was the other idea?
The other one was to do a special for Footsteps and Echoes, which is an anthology I'm in, but there's also a lot of good authors in there as well as me. They just let me in. And they've all got pieces about death and grief and loss, and it goes to charity.
So, okay, I know about the short story one we're going to do. So, what's going to happen with this other one we're going to do? I don't actually know what we're doing with the second one.
I'm going to mention a little bit about it, and then we're just going to play a recording of one of the talented authors in it who's reading an extract from a creative non-fiction piece in there about grief and loss.
Right, okay, that's fine. So I'll say, see guys and girls, organisation.
Yeah.
What was that?
I have no idea.
Never heard of that word, so... Right, okay, so what we'll then do is, we will then obviously do Jan McCarthy's short story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Amanda, do you want to set the rules on this one and tell people what we're doing?
Okay, so she sent in a short story called Hope, which is about 1,500 words long. And rather than have one of us read the whole thing, I've split it up into parts, so we're going to take it in turns.
Right, well, I know which bits I'm doing, so ladies first.
Right. There was nobody in the head of department office when Connor looked in. As he pushed down on the handle of the locked door, his laptop bag slithered off his shoulder, and a heap of cardboard files, precariously balanced on his aching arms, fell to the floor. He bent down, feeling a rush of blood to his face, and the sweat began to gather under his armpits. He swept the files into a heap, glad there was no one there to see him in such disarray. He was sure he had the time right, 10 o'clock, and it was Tuesday, wasn't it? Yes, because he had just had Year 11, war poetry, Tennyson versus Owen. Dulce et decorum is dead. His students had wanted to know about warfare in general. He loved it when the discussion went wider than the set text.
He slung the laptop across his body and picked up his files. Where could his colleagues be? This was the third time in a row we hadn't been able to find them. On the first occasion, he'd seen them getting into the head of the department's car as he came back down the main stairs, and later learnt what they'd decided without telling him, to go to nearby Greasy Spoon for a hot sandwich. They were sorry. He must have just missed them. The second time he managed to find them seated in a porcupine bin.
Portakabin.
A porcupine, I thought it was porcupine. You can see, dyslexia. Sorry, John. Behind the sports hall. He'd put his suspicions they were avoiding onto paranoia. This time, however, he was sure. He was being frozen out, just as Amanda had warned him might happen.
Amanda was Connor's best virtual friend on the mental health forum he had joined after his breakdown. They'd never met, but she had been there night after night when he was in despair, unable to sleep, unable to see any way forward since he had been informed he had bipolar 3 months ago. The thin, pale man in the black leather chair had leant forward, a look on his face Connor had interpreted as pity.
Be prepared for some upheaval, Mr. Webster, he said, laying down his silver ballpoint pen with 2 gold bands around the middle and the scratch along one side. This team is here to support you. And of course, medication will help, but dialysis inevitably brings consequences. Some people may rally round, but others may let you down. So prepare yourself.
Connor had had no choice about his colleagues knowing he'd gone the occupational therapy route. His famous meltdown having happened in the staff room toilets, so the psychiatrist's report had landed on the head teacher's desk long before he dragged himself out of the mire that seemed not only to be inside his head, but all around him. His pupils needed him. This was no time for self-indulgence, he told himself, as he was knotting his tie in front of his hallway mirror. The future of all those exam candidates hung in the balance.
But colleagues wanted him out. They'd made that clear enough. Connor divvied in the corridor, taking a few steps in one direction and a few steps in another. Bitterness filled his stomach and his eyes felt hot, as if tears were building, ready to drop. He had no free hands. One of the pupils saw him crying. Goodness knows they'd had enough in their lives to worry them already about seeing a teacher losing it. Connor ducked in his own classroom and locked the door behind him. He put the files on his desk, went to put down his laptop, decided to hang on to it. He grabbed his raincoat and left the room, looking up behind him, took the back stairs, quit the building for a fire door that allowed him to make his exit unobserved.
It was a gloomy February day, full of drizzle and gusty ice breezes, lost clouds that tore across the sky as if they had forgotten their way home, and trees that seemed to strip naked and exposed as Connor fell. In a small park down the hill, he sat on a damp and rusty wooden and wrought iron bench, half its slats missing, that reminded him of himself. He was tired of trying to prove himself, tired of rejection, tired of everything. It would be hours before he would chat with Amanda on the forum. What would happen when his colleagues discovered he had gone AWOL didn't even cross Connor's mind.
Suddenly he remembered his mother's voice, and she was saying something that always made him laugh. She'd been going through the menopause and regularly collapsing in a perspiring heap on the sofa or on the kitchen chair. "Why, get up and go as Gonson," she would say, puffing and blowing, and fanning herself with the nearest object to hand.
It seemed such a good grown-up response to what she was going through. 8 years of it she'd had, but had always managed to laugh it off. Connor tried a little chuckle, but it dried up in his throat, as if the muscles down there deemed it laughing inappropriate. A grey squirrel heard the strange sound and ran behind the beech tree nearest the bench, chattering madly at Connor and whisking its tail in what Connor supposed was an aggressive gesture.
Connor watched the squirrel, and the squirrel watched Connor. Connor tried to mimic the sound the squirrel had made, and the squirrel must have been convinced it had competition, for it turned, went a foot or two further up the grey trunk, and turned around to look at Connor over his shoulder, flicking its raised tail as to say, "You're an arse." This time Connor could not help but laugh out loud. The squirrel's eyes widened, and it ran fast up the trunk of the beech tree, disappearing when he could no longer see it. But at the same time, a strange hint of freedom came over him. He looked up at the sky, where the sun was doing its best to carve his way through the clouds, show its face. He got up from the beach and began to walk down the hill towards the bus stop. Sod his colleagues. Sod his old life. Sod all those chains being dragging behind him like the ghost of Jacob Marley.
When Connor arrived home, he put on the central heating, made himself a cup of tea and switched on his laptop. He went straight to the forum, and there, to his surprise, was a chat message from Amanda. It read, "Hi Connor, you were on my mind, so I thought I'd leave you this message in case, for some reason, call it intuition. Today's the day when you decide to break loose and find out who the real Connor is. It feels like that kind of day," she had written. "Something to do with spring around the corner maybe. Anyway, when you get this, I'm here if you need me."
Connor fetched 3 chocolate biscuits to have with his tea. He felt like celebrating. He also felt terrified. He read Amanda's message over and over, letting the words sink in. He finished his tea and biscuits, changed out of his suit, and washed his face in cold water. Then he picked up the phone and dialed the number for his school. In the words of his mother, it was time to bite the bullet, to turn over a new leaf. In the words of his distant and trusted friend, He seemed to understand it was time to find who the real Connor was. He was waiting for the school receptionist to pick up. He thought about the squirrel and wished he had a tail to flick at the people who tried to make a victim out of him. Half an hour and several phone calls later, another cup of tea at his elbow. Connor wrote his answer to Amanda.
Hey Amanda, thanks for the message. You were right. It was that kind of day. All thanks to a cheeky squirrel I saw in the park. And you. Going for a run to clear away the cobwebs. Chat later. Hugs. Connor. Outside, the sun had at long last come out, though it looked as though it had used up most of its energy breaking through those crazy clouds. He paused on the doorstep to do some stretches before setting off on his run. He felt a kind of hope rising in him as he took to the streets, a dangerous hope that might take his feet in all kinds of new directions. The pedestrians at the first 3 road crossings were all on green. As he began to get into his natural stride as he ran, people turned to look at the tracksuit-clad man loping along with a smile on his face. The end.
Apologies, Jan, for the slips there, but that was excellent. I enjoyed doing that. Really enjoyed doing that, Amanda. Did you enjoy that? Yeah.
Yeah,
Now,
it's different reading somebody else's work because you're less familiar with it.
yeah, it's one of the ones where I think we set the task on that basis was just read it first time. I hadn't read it before, so I do know Jan because I've done work with Jan before on the podcast, and she's a great lady, great writer. So I can always provide details on for Jan if he wants to get in contact with her. It's not a problem. I know her from the past. Right, Amanda. Obviously now then we're going to get people to obviously perform who's this person doing this other piece for us?
Right. So there's a book called Footprints and Echoes, which I've got 4 poems in, but we're not going to talk about those. And it's edited by something called Write Club, which is part of the Open University for writers that have done courses with the Open University. And it's Adele O'Sullivan and Glenn Proctor who are the editors for that. And shall I read the blurb for the book?
Yes, please. And what we can always do is, if people are wondering, we can get the writer to magically appear, can't we?
Yeah. Right, so A Reflection on Loss, Footprints and Echoes is a collaborative project featuring writers and poets from Write Club OU, the Open University affiliated creative writing society. It's the 4th anthology in their collection. And what it doesn't say in the blurb is that all the profits go to Chums, which is a mental health charity which supports children and young people who have suffered from bereavement and loss.
Is this the book that's the poems about your dad, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So.
the thing that they've been discussing, because they've not marketed it much recently with the lockdown, and there was a discussion on the forum the other day about whether it's a good time to market it or whether it's not good with everything that's going on. But I'm under the impression that apart from people who might have lost loved ones at the moment to do with the coronavirus, it's like there's a lot of grief going on at the moment, even if it's just like grief in like your job or your way of life or not being able to see your friends. And the option is there to buy the book, and if you think it's too much and you want to get away from that, then don't buy the book.
Yeah, it's impossible to have.
It might help some people, because there's like 2 types of people. The type of people that might read it and find it helpful, and the type that don't.
Yeah.
So it's up to people to really decide whether the book's for them or not.
Yeah, you can't really hope to get the market something like the situation out there. So respect of trying to carry this on, really, because, you know, if we were talking about our other podcast, Compass Unity, I think you know I like a writer with Ed Bruckenbender a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
He's got a new graphic novel out shortly called Pulp with Sean Phillips. And I've been following Sean Phillips on Twitter, and Sean said they don't know when it's coming out.
Yeah.
But what Ed's going to do now is, I don't know whether I don't think it was planned as much as, but he's working on a top secret project and bringing it as an online comic where people can go along and download it for free or pay if you want to give money towards it. So he's like, how do you, marketing is a difficult one at the minute, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, I think just letting people know the book's there, and if they know what type of person they are, whether they think they'll find comfort from it or whether they think they just don't want to read about grief at this time. It's up to the individual whether they want to seek the book out then.
Yeah, no, I agree. So, okay, who is the person that is going to magically appear for us, isn't it?
Right, so there's a creative non-fiction piece in there by a writer called Ruth Loten, and she's done a piece called A Little Ray of Sunshine, and that's the extract that we're going to play and leave you with.
Yes, guys, and like I said, well, Reading in Bed will be back for normal services shortly, in the next couple of weeks, but in the meantime, join Ruth today.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Bye. See you soon.
Reading in bed.
An extract from A Little Ray of Sunshine by Ruth Loten. I was numb as I stepped off the bus. I'd left James back at our hall of residence eating breakfast, and in the half hour it had taken my bus to arrive on campus, he'd got dressed and made it there before me. Why was he here? A stupid question I didn't want to acknowledge the answer to. My brother-in-law Christopher was with him, and there could only be one reason for that. You don't have to tell me. I know. I didn't want to hear it. If no one said it, then I could pretend it wasn't true. That was okay, wasn't it? To remain a child for just a few moments longer. I held up my hand as James started to speak, forestalling any platitudes. No, that was unfair. He, at least, would mean the regret and concern he expressed. I'd always been a daddy's girl. He was a coach driver, and when I wasn't at school, I'd often go with him on his trips to Oldham Market, Blackpool Eliminations, and occasionally, if I was really lucky, the Lake District. The first car I drove was his coach, at the age of 6, perched precariously on his knee in a car park as he carefully inched it backwards and forwards while I turned the steering wheel. When he'd retired, we'd spent our days together watching old Hollywood musicals. The day I made him watch Singing in the Rain 4 times in a row may have stretched his patience somewhat, an act for which I am now paying penance in the form of repeating those viewings with my own son, who's similarly obsessed. It wasn't the films themselves that were the real draw for me. It was the sense of closeness I got from watching them with him. He'd tell me snippets of information about the actors in them, or stories from his own life that the films had prompted him to remember. I thought this was what real life was like. You could sing and dance your troubles away, and everything always turned out all right in the end. So when we got the first cancer diagnosis, whilst it was scary, I was convinced that everything would be okay, and sure enough, it was. He had the operation one day while I was at school. Not even sure exactly when in the year this was. Somehow the event has become muddled with us having our boiler replaced and there being no heating for a week. All I can recall is that both happened during an exam week, and both left me feeling cold. Mum picked me up from school, and we drove to the hospital, where she left me in the waiting room, going off to find out what was happening. When she came back, she was pale, her lips pinched tightly together, as though afraid of what might spill out if she opened them. Never seen Mum like this. The strict disciplinarian had been subsumed into a real person with her own frailties and fears. The cancer had spread further than they'd realised. They've had to take out 2/3 of his lung instead of 1. He was in the operating theatre for 6 hours instead of 4, so he's not ready to come home yet. 20 years on, I'm convinced that she didn't blurt out the news quite this bluntly, and I have no recollection of whether he came home that night or if we had to collect him the next day. It didn't matter. I had no reason to imprint any of this on my mind. He'd survived and eventually was given the all clear, so the details were of no concern. He'd live. That was all that mattered.
Reading in bed. Reading in bed.